Hey everyone, and welcome back to my RollerCoaster Tycoon Deluxe build series. This is episode 12, and in this episode we'll be going through Karts and Coasters, which is not my favorite map in this game, that's for sure. It's pretty complex. You come into this map and there's stuff everywhere. A lot of it is not exactly laid out appropriately, especially with the queue lines. But it does have some advantages. In terms of the scenario, it's easy to pass as the existing rides are sufficient to beat the scenario with the addition of ads. So, what I decided to do in my approach with this scenario was to mostly focus on theming, as I do find that that is the larger problem, is trying to make this particular map look good, especially with everything everywhere. There's a lot of trees, there's the two coasters, and the two go-karts, which fill pretty much the entire map. As a result, I don't build a whole lot of additional coasters, only two, one of which is a launch coaster. But I do spend a good amount of time theming. In fact, I was surprised at the runtime of this episode ending up being about an hour and 30 minutes, in that I didn't think that I had done that much building because the map is fairly small. There's nothing to build. There's no land rights to get. I just spent a lot of time putting in the details and mapping out the different areas. It is a difficult map to sort of break down into sections to theme appropriately. And so what I decided to do for the theming was sort of a mountain forest town, I guess you could say. I decided I wanted to use that sort of weird pinkish color that I had encountered during my build of Aqua Park that I said I would use in the future. So I figured that color, along with maybe some purple and bricks, would be sort of the central theming style in this particular map. And I figured I would have it sort of with the town in the center, and then once I built the town in the center where some of the complex interactions between all of the coasters and the go-karts occur, I could sort of expand out and then build some sort of deep forest and lake areas around the town. And yeah, that was sort of my main goal, and I really didn't think it would take me that long to do that. But once I started getting into it and sort of breaking down the different areas and trying to figure out what I wanted to do in each area and to try to make each area somewhat interesting and not exactly the same as other areas, it did end up taking quite a bit of time. Before I got to start on the theming, though, I wanted to get a good layout going in terms of food courts. So I built 4 food courts in the north, south, east, and west. The path network in this is already fairly established, and there's guests all over the park, and I want to keep those guests. So the best approach to sort of give them something to do and deal with their hunger and bathroom and all that stuff, and to make umbrellas available to them, is to just spread out the food courts right at the start, and then I don't end up having to block off any paths or to try to corral the guests in any way. I just let them go all over the park right from the start, and I try to fill in the gaps as I go along. So now that I had set up the food courts, I decided I would start sort of my real building at the central food court, or what is the north food court, although due to the sort of like horseshoe shape of the map, I decided to call this food court the central food court, as it's basically right in the center looking at the radius and things of the area, even though it is fairly close to the front entrance. The front entrance is inset a bit in this particular map. It was a slow start with this one. I really wasn't sure what to do with it. I am really not a fan of this map. There's just so much going on this one. It's almost overwhelming for like exactly the opposite reason that you have the Millennium Mines map being a bit overwhelming. Like that one's overwhelming because it's all brown and you don't have any path networks or anything sort of laid out for you, but you have this big train that goes in the middle of it and you just have to sort of work around it. But for the most part, it's overwhelming just due to the mass amount of empty space. Whereas in this one, it's a little overwhelming for the opposite reason, in that you have this sort of, rides everywhere. And there isn't even like a good central area at the entrance to sort of make something nice. You have to go up on the hill here to really get a good start, which in the end I think ends up looking pretty good. In fact, overall, I'm really happy with how this build turned out, despite the fact that it was kind of a slog to get through this particular one. It did end up being really nice, and I'm really happy with the end result. I'm quite excited to do the outro video for this one. I think it's going to look pretty good. So, some excitement there. Looking forward to that. And, yeah. So now that I had gotten sort of an idea of what my town layout was going to be, I decided I would sort of just expand the town and complete it. I really wanted to hide a lot of the sort of support network that was in this area. I wanted it to look like a fairly flat area and well-developed, nice bridges over things, cement, nice bushes, those types of things. And to go with the sort of pink brick and purple combination that I was going for with this one. And then around the outskirts of the map, I sort of use like more woody textures and things, because it is supposed to be like in the mountain and deep forest, and so I didn't want to make like the whole thing completely developed. So it's not exactly like, say, what I did in Leafy Lake or something like that. I would, it's kind of, I don't know. I tried to do something that was that I hadn't done yet, because I do want each of the parks to sort of have their own character and stand out on their own right, and not have anything too close to anything else. So this was sort of like a scenery and a color scheme that I hadn't played with yet in the series, and so I figured, hey, why not? It works with the map. It works with the map description, with the the park deep in the forest and things like that, and the hilly terrain works well with the idea that this is like a mountain town or something like that. So I really tried to play in that idea. I wanted to add some like small water features and like little lakes around it to sort of give it a little bit more character and to complement the larger lake off to the west of the park. With the coasters, I decided I would just leave them as is for the most part. However, I did make a couple modifications to them, in that I added the photo booth section to the coasters, as well as adding a water splash to the bigger wood chip. There wasn't really a spot to put it on the big wood chip without actually altering the layer, so I decided just to keep it as is. The water splash pretty much saved the bigger wood chip from having very many fatal accidents with the brake failure issue. However, the big wood chip did crash a whole bunch of times in this playthrough. A lot of people died in this park. That coaster is very dangerous. But after a certain amount of time, and after I got the park rating high enough, the periodic crashes didn't really have much of an impact on the park rating. It would recover quickly, and so whatever. That's just that's that roller coaster's thing, the big wood chip. It just crashes every once in a while. You never know. Maybe you're one of the lucky ones that gets to see the cool feature. But aside from that, the coasters were pretty good overall. Like, they didn't crash all that much. I think maybe it was 4 times over the 22 years that this playthrough ran. So it wasn't too bad, but it was a small issue, especially at the beginning with a couple crashes that would happen when I was trying to like keep the park rating up, and I didn't, it was a struggle as is, especially with the starting condition of all of the various rides and things. So it did take some time to clean all that up as I got to the various areas. But in the end, it was okay, and I did reach the goal with no problems whatsoever. There was nothing really overly challenging in this playthrough. It really was just a lot of detailed scenery. I did want to not just have like buildings and trees and that was it. I wanted to have some sort of a setting. So as you can see, I put some rocks in there near the swinging ship. And I do the same thing near the river rapids as well, just to sort of give it some character, and up and around the bigger wood chip on the hill, just to give it something else to blend in with the textures. I decided to make this sort of little stepped archway with a junior roller coaster track on top of it. It's the only piece of track scenery that I use in this playthrough. It's very similar to like what I did in Leafy Lake. I figured something like that would be fitting here, given that I didn't plan to build that many roller coasters. I kind of felt that the terrain, I didn't want to like pack the terrain with a whole bunch of roller coasters. I wanted it to be pretty flat and to really have that like sense of being deep in a forest, but also to provide enough varied scenery that I would be able to show different parts of the park without it looking like other parts of the park. And that's sort of been a theme throughout most of my playthroughs, and I tried to keep with that. And so, very much like Millennium Mines, I only came into this park when I had some sort of inspiration or something that I wanted to do with it. I would sort of build a little bit and then stop and look at the next sort of area of the land that I wanted to conquer in terms of scenery and just making it look nice. And then I would go think about it and do something else for a bit and come back to it and try to pull it off the best I could. I really like this little house that I built. Later on, I make it brick so that it's not quite as contrasting with the rest of the town there, and I end up putting the monorail through it, which is in the screenshot of the video. I found that striking a good balance between the developed area and the forested area and trying to make it look, wildernessly, but also have enough stuff around that it didn't just look sort of barren, was kind of delicate in this one. I didn't want to overbuild, unlike some of the past maps that I had done recently. But at the same time, I did not want to have large areas of land, only scenery, or only vegetation. However, except in the center of the map where there's that sort of valley next to the town to the east, I did want to have mostly just vegetation there. I was figuring where the sort of deep forest would go. So the way that I figured I would lay out this map is that to the west, I would have the sort of lakeside area, which would have a big mansion that backs onto the lake, and then there would be canoes in the lake and river rapids near there. Probably some other rides and stuff too. And then the next sort of strip of land would end up being the town mostly. And then moving over the next strip of land would sort of be like a blend of the town and then the deep forest section that I mentioned. And then moving on, the last strip of land would sort of be like the outskirts of the town. Like there would be a few buildings out there, built here and built there, and to sort of give the idea that the area is starting to be developed, but there's still, this sort of huge forested area, and it's not just like this massive sprawling like micro city or something like that. So that was sort of the idea that I was going for, and I think it turned out pretty good. I was pretty happy with the end result. I did want to make it different from Millennium Mines and not rely so much on the Mine Town theme, which, given that this is a forest theme, was fairly difficult. In the end, I didn't rely too heavily on any particular theme at all, actually. I didn't use the Egyptian theme at all. I used the Roman theme somewhat sparingly. I used it in a few places here and there, the statues and the little temple once, and I didn't use any of the walls or anything like that. And I used the mining theme a little bit on the outskirts areas and stuff like that. But for the most part, I tried to keep it like pretty, I guess you could say, generic RollerCoaster Tycoon. But I also wanted to make it different from the generic RollerCoaster Tycoon that I had done with Leafy Lake, which is a very similar setting, but I think a much more populated town in the end. I really didn't want any forested area in Leafy Lake at all, whereas in this one I felt that I would really play into the forest and work with it as best I could, although in the end I probably end up removing every single tree on the map and then replanting my own trees how I want them, because I wanted to like decorate and things, and the trees were in the way. So in the end I probably removed nearly every tree sooner or later and then replaced it with other stuff or shrubs, or I really tried to play a lot with rock in this particular scenario, given that I wanted the sort of mountain aesthetic as well. So I tried to mix a lot of rocky areas with dirt, and then dirt to grass, and then have some also nice grass areas near the town that get mowed and things. I did kind of a neat thing with the flower beds and the grass, which works pretty well, but the flower beds are like back one, and then I have grass in front of the flower beds, like the nice grass. And this is near the swinging ship. And it worked out really well in that usually I like to place flower beds right next to the path so that they actually get watered by the handyman. However, given that I do allow a few of the handymen in my maps to mow the grass, because why not? I'm not one of those people, given the way that I design my maps, I can't just like mass select nice grass and then apply to all, right? I use a lot of dithering and that type of stuff in my maps. So the if I want my grass to look nice, I actually have to have the handyman go around and mow it, or I'm just going to be wasting a lot of my time trying to keep up with it. Or it's going to look, ratty and ugly. And sometimes I want that look. Sometimes that's a useful look to have, is to not have the mowed grass, but still have the nicer grass that's not mixed with dirt. But, to do that, you have to like strategically position it in a way that the handymen aren't going to actually get to it, which limits how you can use that type of grass. But, that's okay. So now I'm doing the mansion, and I thought it would be neat if the river rapids kind of went off into the forest. Did some stuff in some like sort of rocky hill area, into a tunnel, out a tunnel, had some rapids and then a slope, and then went underground, and then would come out like under the mansion area and just sort of do like a little loop around before it went back to the station. And then I threw the waterfalls and stuff under there because I thought it looked cool. And it really turned out nice. I threw the brick up in front like that to give it some layering to the house, and so it didn't look like it was just the black and then water. And yeah, I really, really like how this turned out. I would say that it's probably like the main feature of this side of the map. It's really nice. I didn't want to put any additional roller coasters on this side of the map, given that it is so densely packed with the bigger wood chip. And once I came through and put the monorail as well, that was pretty much it for space. I didn't want to do a whole lot with it because, again, I wanted to keep that whole sort of deep forest mountain-esque feel. So, but yeah, I really like this mansion area. It's probably my favorite area of the park overall. It's really neat when the river rapid boats go in and under the house there. Really nice. I like it. I also do like how this pink turned out working with the brick and everything like that. I actually think that on this particular map, with how I did the color scheme and stuff, it actually works really well. So there we go. I found a use for it, and I end up pretty much covering almost the entire map in it, at least the areas that are town-ish as opposed to like woodlands-ish. I'm actually really happy with how the entire town turned out. Just the way that the rides all sort of combine in the center there with the two wooden roller coasters and then the go-kart, and then the other roller coaster that I add later sort of comes into the same area. And then the town I had with the design here with the big house on the end and then sort of like the large road. And then there's a tunnel that dips in underground where the exit for the go-karts used to be, which is like this huge, long, annoying exit. But dipping a tunnel underground there near the information kiosk, the central information kiosk, allowed that to be turned into a nice walkway, and it really solves like a whole bunch of problems. Not just the poorly placed exit, but also transportation and getting more people to the other side of the park. Of course, I didn't really want very many people on the other side of the park yet, but I didn't want to build those types of things after the fact, so I figured I would just leave the sort of underground tunnel and allow the people to have more mobility to the part of the park that I hadn't built in yet. But later on, it is pretty cool how I bring in the corkscrew coaster and it does a corkscrew sort of over that path just before the tunnel. Later on, I think on that side of the park, it's like my favorite feature of the park. I think it's really neat, especially how I was able to fit it in between the wooden roller coaster and then the sort of edge of the town, which, I gave the house like a nice backyard and some different trees and stuff. I tried not to use too many of the pine trees or, winterish trees. The name for them isn't coming to my mind at the moment right now. But in the town, I wanted to use like a much lighter green to sort of complement the feeling of the town and then surrounding it with the darker green. And I think that turned out pretty well. It gives a nice contrast between the two areas and really like sort of identifies that, this area is different than this area, which is always a challenge in a map like this one, where everything is going to end up being kind of the same, but you want it to be different enough that it's not exactly the same. So now I decided I would do the sort of rocky terrain around the river rapids. I really like how this turned out too. I think that the choices I made in the way that I sort of stack the different layers of terrain worked really well. I had the rocky near the swinging ship, and then it was sort of like some dirt and some grass, and you got the water feature there, and then the water splash, and then there's like some more rockiness, and then the river rapids, and then you have the large lake. And I wanted there to be water features all across, but again, not larger than the lake. I wanted the lake to be the main water feature that was uh, and I didn't want to put too much into water rides. I was debating putting a log flume on the eastern side of the park, but once I put the other tracked rides in, which is what I'm beginning to do here, I started with the monorail, and then the next one I do is the other roller coaster. And then once I had the track rides in, I basically filled in all the gaps. But once I had those in on the eastern side of the park and I looked at it, it seemed a little too full. Same thing with the drop coaster. I wanted to put one of those vertical drop coasters in this map as well, but again, once I sort of put in the tracked rides and I set up the pathing and I got more of the theming done, I don't think it would have fit properly. It would have looked out of place or too busy, or it would have lost the sort of style aesthetic that I was going for. So unfortunately, in the end, we only get the four different roller coasters, and again, one of them is a launch coaster. So this map is not very heavy on the roller coasters, which is another surprising aspect given the length of time that I have spent on this. I think this is now my second longest playthrough next to Evergreen Gardens, and yet it has so much less. I feel like that I don't understand how I spent so much time working on this one, but yet at the same time I do, just given the densely packed detail. Whereas in, say, Evergreen Gardens, a lot of the scenery was done for me in Evergreen Gardens. For one, I only sort of appended on what was already there. But at the same time, I also tried not to densely pack it. I wanted to really have that sense of one town over here and one town over there, and space in between, and sort of like the intersection and the interchange and where all that stuff was happening. And the nice, like, sort of railroad, the scenic railroad. So it's quite a bit different in that respect from this one, which I tried to basically densely pack as much scenery in as little space as possible to try to really give it that dense forest, and developed feeling depending on the area where it was. I decided I would use just some basic pathing for the moment and allow the station to be suspended in the air for the remaining monorail stations. I didn't want to work on them until I got to the area that I was working on. So I wasn't exactly certain how I wanted that area to look yet. And so I figured I would just, do whatever I had to do to make it so that I could open the monorail, because I really wanted to get a lot more traffic sort of moving in and around the park faster. I was also going to set up a chairlift once I had sort of gotten a little bit further into the two wings of the park, the east and western sides of it. I figured I would end up turning this hill into some sort of monorail station building also later on. So I just set up some quick monorail station stuff here and kind of got a feel for where I might want the paths to go. Subject to change, always subject to change. And that was about it that I did there, and then we just continue on. I did end up adding a fourth station a little bit later on. At first I had just omitted it, and I figured it might be okay if the monorail just goes right back to the original station right from there, kind of cutting through the area that would be deep forest. But once I sort of realized where I wanted the chairlift to go, I realized that this side of the map wouldn't have a whole lot in terms of transport accessibility and would be really hard to get over here. So I figured I might as well bring the monorail over and add the fourth station. So later on, I do expand it a little bit further into the eastern side here. I think what spent most of my time was like fences, honestly. I put a lot of fences in this particular map. I wanted to layer them together so that like you get different effects and things, and it can really present, like use them to hide supports on some of the wooden roller coasters, and just to add a little bit more depth. I used a lot of the sort of mesh fence to, give a little bit more character to the go-karts. Yeah, I used a lot of fences, and I spent a lot of time just sort of making like different designs and ideas with the fences, and I tried to stick as many of them in as possible. So I think that's where most of my time probably went, was fences. So I'm really sorry that this is a hour and a half build that's going to be mostly building various fences around the park. But yeah, I do still think that the end result ends up being really, really, really nice. It beat my expectations. Like coming into the map, I did not think that the end result was going to be very good. In fact, honestly, when I had first started building on this map, after the first 15 minutes or so, and I kind of got started with that stuff, like I was really debating making this sort of like the first map where I just play the scenario goals and that's it, because that's probably what I'm going to do for Big Pier, because I don't know what else I can do. Like I can build some rides and put down like benches and things, and that's about it. Like I can't make it nice. I can try to make it organized, but in terms of like scenery and things, I can't make it nice. And I'm not going to do like ride-based track scenery all over the place to try to enhance it. I might put like an archway here or there or something like that, but I'm not going to construct whole buildings out of ride tracks or anything like that. So, uh, it could be that Big Pier just ends up being scenario goals. We'll just see what happens when I get there. But I was very, very, tempted just to sort of play the scenario on this one, given that like so much is built for you already. And if you watch my video where I played Diamond Heights and I got to sort of like the foresty area at the outer edge of, like the far side of the park, I just kind of like, I didn't do a whole lot there. I just did some dithering and some forest, and I added a few fences and things like that. Now, given that was at the outer edge of the park where a lot of people, the peeps in the park end up getting lost anyway. So it's not like you want to build a whole bunch of complex pathing out that way, because it takes them a long time to get back to the entrance if they decide that's what they want to do. And most of them, well, not I wouldn't say most, but there's a fair amount of peeps that by the time that they get within the vicinity of the entrance have decided that they're lost, and I talk about that in my Diamond Heights video. Here we are with the corkscrew over the path. Yeah, I really like it. It's just it fits so perfectly, especially again with the sort of junior roller coaster or mini steel roller coaster track over the entrance archway. Then you have like this nice path that comes out of this tunnel that's underneath the house, and then you have like this sort of archway, corkscrew roller coaster archway, and again sort of along the lines of what I did in Leafy Lake, where I had one that was fake and then the large vertical loop on top of the house, which actually worked and stuff. It's kind of neat that the corkscrew here, the corkscrew archway, is fully connected and works properly. And just fits nicely. I was surprised, I was coming into that area building the roller coaster, and I was just like, I don't know if this is gonna work. I'm probably gonna have to back out of this idea, but let's see what happens. Now, the one thing that did happen is that the intensity on this roller coaster, given the number of inversions and things that I had, was pretty high. It was just over 10 with that sort of steep drop that had a turn in it. And so, what I decided to do instead was to throw a few helixes so that it would not have as much speed approaching that corkscrew, and that worked perfectly actually. Like, it brought it down just under 10. High, I can't remember what the excitement is on it, but it's also quite high. And yeah, really really great ride. The peeps love it, and it never crashed once. Yeah, none of the rides that I build in this one crashed at all. It was just the wooden roller coasters that are prone to crashing anyway, so it wasn't like that aspect of it was unexpected. Coming into the lake area, I wanted the house to sort of be the bridge point, and it would connect to some nice sort of stone paths, and those would run along the lakeside down to some dirt paths, and then you would have sort of this idea that the paths are descending down from the house and then into the more wildernessy area. I later decided to put a path through that little tiny house as well, to extend to a car ride, as I felt that that area in the back corner was just a little too empty and could use an additional ride. And I wasn't exactly certain where I wanted to put the car ride anyway, so that worked out well. I wanted to have some of these dirt paths sort of separate from the town, so that the town was surrounded by a more wildernessy idea, so that the town didn't come right up to the entrance. So I sort of mark the archway as the outer border on the north side of the town. Of course, it sort of sprawls out into different directions. It's not like a perfect square or perfect circle or anything like that. But the idea was that the archway would sort of be the entrance to the town, and then just before the entrance, you've got some sort of like some nice pavement leading up to the entrance. But then there's also a couple paths that branch off where you can go directly into like the forest or the lake area without passing into the town first. For some of the areas, I wasn't exactly certain what I should do for a terrain, so I figured that I would just go with the standard sort of mine town wood roof type thing if I was uncertain what I should do there, as it looks good in just so many different places. But again, I did try not to rely too much on that mine town roof. I didn't want to have like a whole bunch of wooden buildings and things all over the place, sort of like echoing what I just did in Millennium Mines. I really wanted to, produce something a little bit different this time around, uh, and something maybe a little bit more original than just going with in-game themes. Although, of course, I mean, I'm just going with like generic theme park, I guess. So maybe it's worse, maybe it's better. I'm not sure. You can let me know what you think about that in the comments if you have an opinion. But yeah, so you know, here I am building the car ride. I thought it was kind of neat if it would be up high on the hill there and then have a nice sort of connecting bridge that would go over the go-karts. I also wanted a tunnel that would connect to this area and go all the way down to the path on the lakeside there. So there I am building the entrance to what will become the tunnel. And Yeah, I thought it was kind of neat having sort of the bridge come to one side of this car ride, and then you go up the hill, and then go down the hill, and then come around, and then there's a tunnel that descends down to the lake on the other side. And that just keeps a nice loop going, and guests don't have to walk too far just to get to the car ride and then turn around and be like, I don't want to ride that, or whatever the case may be. Now, I did switch to an entrance fee based park pretty early in this playthrough, around 500 guests, as I did want to keep as many guests in the park as possible. And given the number of rides that already existed, it just made sense to do, as the rides already existed to justify the entrance price. And I could pump a whole bunch of ads and then get a whole bunch of guests in, and then you combine that with the umbrella stuff, and money wasn't really an issue at any given point in this scenario. In fact, a lot like Millennium Mines, near the end of this scenario, I was rolling in cash. Like, there was way more cash than I would ever be able to spend. So I didn't have to worry too much about money at all in this scenario. But that wasn't unexpected, given that the pre-existing rides are all fairly decent rides that you can charge a lot for right off the gate. So immediately, right at the start of the game, I just paid off my loan. I didn't even bother with a loan. I think there was a couple times during the playthrough where whatever I was building happened to exceed, my piggy bank at the time, and I end up having to take like a $1,000 or $2,000 loan just to finish off whatever it is I'm doing within a reasonable time frame, as I don't want to sort of stop playing and wait for too long before I continue the build, as those types of things can make the editing process of the videos kind of annoying. So sometimes the way that I play is actually geared more towards trying to make my life easier in the future as I edit these videos and things like that. So I'll take loans just to make sort of a consecutive area where I'm building something and I don't have to make too many cuts and things. Getting the detail in this area took a long time. I would say the Lakeside area is probably about, between the town and the Lakeside, that's about 60% of the playthrough. The forested area did not overall take that long to accomplish. Once I sort of had the town and everything else in place, those areas just sort of came together just based on what made sense. But the town and the Lakeside area, I really had to think about sort of what I would want that to look like. I didn't want it to look all crappy. So I really wanted to, have that sort of grand house. In fact, I'm happier with the house than I thought I would be. Like, I look at with the nice river rapids going underneath, and sort of the queue line which forms this balcony and things. I think it looks really neat, way better than I was hoping for. Really good. And then sort of with the stone path and everything that descends down from it, and then that bridge extension. Yeah, I just, this area I'm really, really happy with. I'm glad I took the time to really think it through about what I wanted to be where and things like that, and how I was going to decorate it. Yeah, really nice. I figured I would complete the sort of hillside here with the rocky terrain, the rock and the dirt, and then this would sort of extend up that larger hill as well a little bit later on. Although with the larger hill, I did keep a little bit more grass there, as there's a lot more area, and so I thought it made a bit more sense for there to actually end up being some areas that were able to grow grass, or things like that, especially closer to like the path and the water line. Again, dark colored trees. I wanted to. The tree balance is another thing that was really interesting in this one, is that some areas I wanted to be more like shrub focused, and other areas I wanted to be extremely dense in terms of the trees, to sort of give like a blend between the two. So you'd have like the rocky areas where there's some shrubs here and shrubs there, and then you have like, you know, one or two pine trees or something like that. And then you have uh, the alternative, which is the deep forest areas where there's just trees everywhere. And I tried to stick as many trees in as I could. I would just randomly click. It's one of the few times that I've actually, like, I'm usually pretty precise with how I place trees and things. I'm like, the mass spam tool in OpenRCT2 is not a very useful tool for me, just given to the way that I prefer to do scenery. And I like things to look a certain way and to be filled a certain way and have a certain amount of variety and weight to the variety and so on. So that tool isn't very useful to me. But in this particular map, if I had had that tool, I probably would have used it for the deep forest areas, as I just wanted to spam all, sorts of different pine trees in there. Again, I don't remember what the name of those. It's right on the tip of my tongue. Is it deciduous? Are those the deciduous trees? They might be. I don't know. I'm not going to Google it right now. I'm busy recording my voiceover for this video, so I'll make a mental note to try to remember my tree names for future videos. But I've never been very good with names, so if I screw things up, I'm probably just thinking about something else or what I'm about to say in like 5 minutes or something like that. I don't know. You don't want to get inside my brain. It's chaos, pure chaos in there. Absolute chaos. Definitely do not want. So I finally decided to do the monorail, as I was going to come around now and basically decorate the rest of the lake. So I wanted to get all the infrastructure in and to, sort of get a lot of the various features and things. I thought it was neat having the path right alongside that go-karts. I would have like a nice mesh fence between the two. I thought that was kind of neat, following sort of the mesh fence pattern that I had in this area, alongside the go-karts and alongside the path, which, again, I think it looks really neat, given that, it is a small area, so there wasn't like a whole lot that I could do. I was debating doing a bit more in terms of buildings, where, like, maybe up on that hill there's a building, or right on the other side of the go-karts, or the go-karts have to go through a building or something. But in the end, I figured that given it is a lakeside sort of thing, and it's sort of like that house's lake. Like if someone bought that house or something, maybe that's their lake and that's their canoes and something like that. So that was kind of the end effect that I was going for. And then I just threw that twist in to be, a little bit closer to the water, just to have a little bit more there for guests to come and do, aside from just transporting to the lake and having nothing nearby. The transport ride, which I don't think there's really that much near that transport ride anyway. Like, I do end up building the chairlift and the inverted swingy ship a little bit of ways away from here, but I probably could have made that monorail station about 3 or 4 tiles closer, to the south, and it would have been okay. But future considerations. Once again, at some point I will replay all of these in RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic or OpenRCT2 or both. Decided I would do the chairlift building now. I wanted a nice big sort of mountainside house-like building that would hold the chairlift and also provide a anchor point for a bridge that would go up and over the bigger wood chip there. So I would basically bring a path in from the bottom of the hill where there's already the existing tunnel, and I would branch off that tunnel, come up into the house, and hopefully have enough room that I could do an entrance queue for the chairlift, and also a down and up ramp that would allow me to sort of connect the lower portion to the upper portion. And then I'd be able to have a path that could go all the way, around the park as well. And I almost kind of gave up on this idea. I couldn't quite come up with something that would give me enough space for everything. But finally, I did come up with a design that worked properly and allowed me to have an exit path at the proper height to go over the roller coaster as well. So, mission accomplished. I did exactly what I wanted to do. Although I would have liked to have the path that goes over the roller coaster sort of over one, and I would have liked to have the chairlift over one so that they're not right pushed up next to the edge of the wall inside the building. But give and take. There's gotta be some compromises when you're doing weird things like that. So coming over here, I figured I would connect the chairlift to yet another giant, sort of chairlift station. And this one would have the monorail just go right through it, and the monorail station would be also just down the road there, or the path. So I tried to kind of mirror the same setup on both sides. I do feel that, again, this one is a little too north from what I wanted. But looking at like the area, I couldn't find another area where I felt that a big giant chairlift station would fit in well. And I thought this was kind of the perfect area here. Stuck in the corner, the monorail could go underneath it, and it would provide a nice little support for the corkscrew roller coaster as well. With the infrastructure in place, I could start making this hill a little bit more mountain-esque. I also wanted to have a path that connected these two sides and was purely outside with a nice little like sort of boardwalk effect there. I thought that was just a little bit better than the tunnel system, but I keep the tunnel system because the tunnel system now is sort of like the entrance to the chairlift / bridge to the upper level. Though I actually end up putting another path that sort of goes up like a rocky hill area to the upper level as well, connecting just before the bridge that goes over the bigger wood chip there. Some nice bushes to kind of decorate it. Again, I had to pull up the land to get the support height for the monorail there, and so I felt that I would just put some sort of like chain link fences alongside where I had to pull up the land, just to give it like this effect that, if you did end up going down there, there would be something to prevent you from jumping off this big cliff onto the ride or something like that. Now we're building the stone approach for the pathway that I would have connecting up here. I wanted something kind of cool and winding. This would be the pathway that leads up to the inverted swinging ship. So I wanted something that kind of fit with a swinging ship, or given it's the inverted one, so whether or not it's like a seafaring ship or a starship that flies, I guess everyone has their opinion on that. The one that's in game kind of reflects both, so I guess that's probably intentional. But in this case, we're going to say that it's an inverted seafaring ship, which is not very practical when it comes to seafaring ships. But, again, if that's what you want to ride on, that's what you're going to ride on. So I figured I would kind of have it up in the air here. This ended up being a little too high in the air, and I needed something a little bit lower to get a path network that would look a little bit more natural and not like these massive, wood mesh paths that are up in the air. I'm really not a fan of the wood mesh. Like it looks good if it's done sort of in moderation or in certain settings. But having too much of the wood mesh, I find just sort of makes a mess of whatever it is. I much prefer having the sort of like stone pylons on my path. I think they look a lot cleaner. Although they don't always fit into various settings either, so there's that. But I have them on the balcony there on the house because I think it just looks, like if you had the wood mesh there, it wouldn't look very good. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in this corner, and then I figured it would be kind of neat if like the space shot or woe belly ride kind of shot up here, and then the path that would come would like loop around, and then it could kind of hover over it and hide it, and then I could put some shops in and around there. I end up putting a few like sort of bathroom souvenir stands that stand apart from like the full-on food courts, and a bunch of various balloon stalls too. I wanted to have lots of colorful balloons in this one. I thought that would kind of help with the drab nature of the surrounding forest area, because I did want it to be like colorful and nice and things like that, and especially with the lighter greens. But I also did want to stick with like the deep forest and like the bricks and sort of lighter shades of colors. Not have anything too radically colorful, sort of like what I did in Leafy Lake, where it was like very like red and blue and white, and it was very very colorful. And then I used every color of the different houses and all of these things. Like I pretty much used every color that existed in the game, I think, for that one. So I didn't want it to be like that one, but I wanted it to be, pretty colorful in sort of like its own way. And so something that I did to sort of augment that, given that I wasn't going to be using all those different colors of the walls and things like that, was to add a lot of umbrella stands and a lot of balloon stands, so that there's a whole bunch of different colors of umbrellas and a whole bunch of different colors of balloons all over the park. And mostly that was just so that I could have the additional color in there for the end screenshot when I did inevitably end up taking it, which I think turned out pretty good. Once again, I didn't have to stray from my strategy of sort of taking a screenshot of the entrance of the park. So I do think that worked out really nice, and it does add a lot of color and character to it, and with the town centered and things like that, and then the surrounding forest and the Rocky Mountain and things like that. Not the Rocky Mountains for those Canadians out there, but just the mountain in my map that is rocky. I think the balance of all the different areas was able to get into the screenshot, which is great, because some of my screenshots end up being like, it's all like this one theme, and there's this whole other park out there, but it's not in the screenshot. And so I always wonder if you look at the screenshot and then you watch the video, and then you're like, oh, there's way more park than the screenshot shows. So it's really nice when I end up getting a layout in a park where I can showcase within that front screenshot sort of a little bit of all the different theming elements that are going into it, without showing like too much of any one thing. Like I really do want it to be where sort of like you're coming into the park and like experiencing the park, and then like that. So just a little bit of inside baseball on my thought process on how I try to structure these videos, and kind of what I'm aiming for here. I was basically done this area of the park. I just needed to throw a little bit more detail in terms of bushes and things like that, and to throw the fences around the border of the park. I successfully was able to border all of the park bounds in this particular scenario. The few areas where it didn't make sense, where like I had go-karts or something right up against the border, what I ended up doing was just putting like a building there so that the fencing would connect to the building, and then I wouldn't have to put more fencing there, or have like this spot where the ride's up against the fence, but there should be a fence there, but because of the way go-karts works or the wooden roller coaster work, they both have the same width, and so they don't allow fences right up against them on the same tile. It always has to be a adjacent tile. So putting buildings up against the edge of the park really helped in that scenario. I do that. Mostly that's done like in the sort of far reaches of the eastern side of the park, where which one is that? The turnpike go-karts are? Yeah. Sneaking the launch coaster in there, I thought was a pretty good use of the tiny strip of space at the back of the park there. It also allowed me to kind of put a couple buildings in the park, which would allow me to get rid of some of the wooden mesh supports at the higher end of the bigger wood chip there at the chain lift. And I usually do that just to give some different texture and stuff, so that you don't have like this huge wall of mesh, like mesh support and stuff like that, so it looks a little bit different, and has a little variation in color and stuff like that, because I do find that having like those huge walls of mesh all the same color, just it doesn't look that great in this game, especially when you have like a whole bunch of winding paths and things like that with that particular wooden mesh. Yeah, it just it's too much. So having the dual purpose building that way is great. So that building acts as the station building for the launch coaster, and it also provides sort of a nice tunnel access for the monorail to go in and around underneath the pathway of the ride, and then connect to the monorail station, which ends up sitting right beside it. And once I complete theming this side of the little building area, I'll build the other building. I'm not sure which building I like better. I do think I like this sort of L-shaped building I created under the high end a little bit better than the one that I build right next to it. And maybe one was a bit too big or something like that. I don't know. I find that the area does look a little crowded for what I wanted. But it's still okay. I do like both buildings, and in the end, I do think that the area has a nice blend of different scenery and things. It just does feel like the back is a little building heavy, given that so much of the town is small, and then there was these like sort of giant buildings at the back. I'm not sure what they are. I don't know how it makes sense, and especially being that they're on the far side of the rocky area. Although in the end I end up I've got like the giant chairlift buildings, and I make the station for the corkscrew coaster pretty much a giant like brick building as well. So in the end there's giant brick buildings all over the map to sort of balance it out in between all of the deep forests. So there is that going for it. On the back sides of these things, I never quite know what to do, given that I'm probably never going to like show that particular angle in any of the outro videos or things like that. Like it looks okay, but it's just not a good, having the high stuff in the front and then the low stuff in the back just usually doesn't make for a good scene. But I do like to have the entire area themed as well, so that in the case that let's say I like publish these parks or something, I would like them to be complete. So I do put some time into areas that don't end up actually ever making it into any videos or anything like that, just because I do like to have my parks relatively complete all around. Even though like areas like that backside, I probably could have saved some time and just, thrown some trees back there or something like that, and it really wouldn't have made a difference because it would never see it anyway. But no, I decided I would put some gates on the roofs and statues and stuff instead. Okay, so yeah, I mean, like, you can it kind of pokes out behind the wooden statue, but really the only reason that I did that is because I wanted that area behind it to kind of represent a building too, because I needed the launch coaster to go under the mountain, which is the reason why I built a custom one, by the way, instead of just using like the pre-built Force 9, which I did in previous maps, is because I needed the coaster to go through the hill. Cleaning up those queue lines for the bigger wood chip and the big wood chip is a real pain as well. Just the way that they have the exits and queues just starting at the beginning, just going off into like way different directions, and they're on these huge paths and things. Those definitely had to be cleaned up. I tried to bring the queue line entrance as close to the exit as possible, and I fix it for most rides. The only ride that I think I don't actually end up finding a way that was useful to do that for is the King Karts. That entrance and exit are like completely in separate parts of the walkway. But aside from that, I did end up fixing the majority of the queues and shortening them, or making it so that they were easier to find for the guests. The guests do find that the queue at the back of the park there for those roller coasters is difficult to find for some reason. I'm not exactly certain why. Like in terms of the algorithm, I'm not certain why guests for some reason can't find the entrance to that roller coaster. But at the beginning of the playthrough, if you look at some of the guest thoughts and stuff, they want to go ride like the big wood chip or the bigger wood chip, or maybe it's just the big wood chip that they can't find. But yeah, they can't find the entrance to it, even though it's a roller coaster. Like, it goes into the air. They should be able to see it from pretty much any part of the park. I'm not talking like them as a person. I'm saying like algorithmically, tall rides are supposed to be visible. And basically act as landmarks or waypoints, right? So that if you station like enough rides all around your park, you don't really need park maps or anything, because there's always something like visible that they can go to. But I'm getting off topic. So what I was actually saying, before I went off on how the height of the rides work, is that, yeah, the guests for some reason are not able to find the entrance to the big wood chip, though in the original position, with it going way off into the path. And it's not like it does anything like really weird or windy or anything like that. So that's the part I don't really understand of why algorithmically, okay, I can't say that word right now, and you're just gonna have to forgive me. Algorithmically. What the hell? Why can't I say that word? Algorithmically. There we go. Okay. Algorithmically, it should work as far as I understand it. There's nothing, weird or that wacky really going on. The only thing that's really weird or wacky is that it goes off into the way deep eastern part of the park, which there isn't anything over there. So maybe that's what it is that the queue line is basically going into an area of the park where there's nothing nearby, thus giving no incentive for guests to ever wander over there thinking that something would be over there, because there's nothing else over there. I don't know. I can only begin to guess. There's lots of things that go into the algorithm. I would love to see what the original guest pathfinding algorithm actually looks like, but is what it is. So, but I fixed it anyway with bringing the queue line right underneath next to the station and then having it come out, right next to the exit. It pretty much solves the problem. And by the time I was done building the park, there was no guests getting lost anywhere and or getting tired or anything like that. But that's because I had benches and rides and stuff everywhere. As long as you have things within a reasonable distance, and as long as there's something for them to go for, it really helps. That's sort of why I started with the food courts as well, is to give them a destination to go for in all of those various parts of the park, so that they're not walking too long without encountering something. That's really important in keeping your guests happy in this game. The move into the forested area really was a slog. Again, going back to my Diamond Heights playthrough, these areas where there's like a whole bunch of pre-existing rides and then like forested area and stuff like that. Oh, it really is like a chore to go through and theme these areas. Which is why on Katie's World, I'm kind of glad that I didn't actually decide to go ahead and just theme everything. Because it's also kind of similar in that way, in that, there's like the large roller coaster, and it's a little bit of a chore, but it's not as big of a chore because you don't have a whole bunch of stuff everywhere going in and out of the ground and all of these things. Like, it's debatable whether or not removing the rides in this map is actually the better option or the worse option. I mean, it gives you a whole bunch of money off of the start, but money isn't really an issue anyway. Like I said, I paid off my loan right at the start of the game and just started making money, and that was good enough for what I needed to build, to get things rolling. And by the time that I wanted to build larger stuff, I had a larger piggy bank. So it all worked out. But, the other strategy to this map is that you just sell everything right at the beginning and kind of start with a blank slate. But, I don't know if that's really a great way to play this particular map. I mean, aside of maybe if you really want to sandbox it, but there's so many other like better maps to just sandbox that if you wanted to play a sandbox map, like I would say that something like Evergreen Gardens or Forest Frontiers or something like that. Like coming into this map with it being such a difficult terrain, and then wanting to sandbox it without keeping the rides. I don't know if I'd want to do that. I think keeping the rides is a more useful strategy as you get all that money, and the guest cap as well from the roller coasters and the go-karts. I think that's a more useful aspect in the long run than just, I'm not sure what you would get if you sold those rides. It wouldn't be that much. Like, not relatively, not if you want to replace it with something comparable in terms of like capacity and the guest cap and all that stuff. You'd have to spend a lot of time doing it. But if you're one of those people that likes to remove the carts and coasters in the carts and coasters map, let me know in the comments why you like doing that, and I would be curious to know why you prefer it over the keeping the carts and coasters. I mean, like, I can totally understand that it takes the space, so if you don't want to deal with the fact that there's all these rides everywhere, yeah, I kind of get that. That can be an annoying aspect of this map. But then again, like, if that's how, again, that's why I would say, like, but then if you want to sandbox it, like, why not just play something like Evergreen Gardens or something, and then just try to like rush this map, speed run it, and just get through it as fast as you can, instead of like actually spending the time to replace things that already exist. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, let me know what motivates you to do such a thing. I would be very curious. So going into the northeastern part here, I wasn't really sure what to do here either because it was like I had so much forest and I already had the town. And originally, I didn't want this area to be developed. I figured it should be foresty too. But then once I brought the chairlift in, it didn't feel right making it deep forest as well because the chairlift's other extended, like the other side of the chairlift, kind of went to that sort of mountain range. So I thought it would make sense if the chairlift began in developed area and then went off to the mountain or whatever. So extending the sort of developed town feel into this side of the map ended up just, it seemed to make sense to me. I'm not sure if it was really the right choice or not, given that it's sort of still surrounded by, woodland. I don't know if I did the blending into the town area all that well. Like it's sort of like town adjacent as opposed to like part of the town. And then just like, steps away, you've got sort of like this maze and space rings, which are heavily themed in the, sort of more woodlandy type thing. So I don't know if I really pulled that one off great, but maybe. I had to make a lot of use of the, see-through rides, see-through scenery in this one to really just get the terrain looking how I wanted it. Like it sort of, the thing with the terrain, especially on maps like this one with the forest, is once it's all said and done, like if you look at a screenshot of it, and this is something I particularly noticed rewatching the Diamond Heights video, is that, when you look at sort of the work that went into the far end of the map, the more foresty area of the map, it's really hard to sort of like notice that anything was done, even though a lot was done. Like I put a lot of trees, I put a lot of fences, I put, a lot of terrain dithering and things like that. But if you just sort of, if you compare it side by side to just, stock Diamond Heights, right when you begin the scenario, you can see the difference, and there's a lot, it's a big difference. But if you're just looking at it without having that comparison, it's sort of like if you do the scenery right, it's almost not noticeable. Like you'll notice some stuff, but if it's too close to stock, it might not be noticeable. Like, the dithering of the terrain is a big one where, you know, it's really noticeable when you have like all just bright green terrain. But when you have actual like nice dithered terrain, it's almost like it becomes just part of the scene, and it becomes almost unnoticeable that any work went into making that happen in the first place. And so that's something that I really noticed rewatching the Diamond Heights one, is that it feels like the beginning of the video, like there's nothing there. It's Diamond Heights as is, even though it isn't. Like there's actually a lot that I spent a good deal of time there just sort of working through all of the holes in the ground and putting fences in areas and trying to like decorate it in various ways. And yet when I look at the decoration, it's like it just sort of blends in, and I unless I actually go back and look at a stock Diamond Heights, it feels stock to me almost at this point. It was really a gradual process theming this stuff. I didn't want to get too overwhelmed and try to like bite off more than I can chew by theming like a whole bunch of different areas and then end up with like a bunch of sort of scattered non-themed holes, and then have to like sort of scour the map for areas where I didn't feel that enough was done. I really tried to leave areas that I hadn't touched yet, or that I hadn't thought about yet, as clean as possible, even if there was like a couple ideas that I might have had, until I had the inspiration for the entire thing, which I sort of used fences to section stuff off. That screenshot right there, or this sort of section of the video here, is a good example of how I did that, where I would sort of like take a section of land, I would fence it off, I would figure out what this sort of section of land is supposed to be, figure out how I'm going to approach it given the surroundings, and then I would go ahead, fence it off so it was very clear, and then I would apply the terrain. So again, it's very clear when I have like all the scenery off and things like that, which I had to do a lot here. And then, just try to apply some various things to it, but not chew off too much, like not go too far where now all of a sudden I have to place all this scenery in all of these different occluded spots. I wanted to be able to keep track of what it is that I was trying to keep focus on, and, not oversight anything, or, because that's like the worst. It really annoys me when I rewatch a video and I see something and I wanted to change that one thing, and it's just, and I didn't, or I missed it. Like I won't mention any, but when, maybe people will notice them eventually. I mean, there is a lot that goes on in my videos, so unless you're really paying close attention to, like, this one fence or something in the one half a second that it shows on screen or something like that, you're probably not going to notice. But there is a few things that are kind of funny, like going back and examining my videos closely, as I always rewatch my videos before I come into making a new video. Partly because I want to be inspired by the things that I've created before. Like, I want to create some similar things and kind of play off previous themes that I've done so that there's some consistency across my parks. But also because I want to, do something a little bit different as well. I want to be like, what could I have done different here? Or what could I have done different there? What can I expand on and try to make a little bit more interesting? Or at the very least, if there's nothing that I really feel applies to a particular park, which it was kind of the end result here, was, like I watched my videos, but none of them were very inspiring in terms of things to build, because I really did want to do something quite different. And the closest stuff that would match this particular theme, which would have been, Forest Frontiers, Leafy Lake, Diamond Heights, that's probably it that comes close. Maybe Aqua Park, but Aqua Park, given the number of themes that are available in that one, I don't think really applies, because I did really try to play into the themes there instead of like the generic theme. So the more generic ones are probably a closer fit, but there just really wasn't anything in them that I wanted to repeat or make prevalent in this one. But the other aspect of it is that I do like to sort of review what I've done in outros, and I like to improve the outro, and I hope that I'm doing that, because when I first started making these videos, I really had no idea what I was doing or what I was aiming for. They've kind of taken shape over a period of videos. I would say probably by the time that I reached Evergreen Gardens, I had a pretty good idea, like, what it is that I'm making and how they should work and that type of thing. But leading up to them, I mean, Forest Frontiers, literally, I was like, how should I end the video? I don't know, I'll put some music, and then it was like, maybe I'll just make it sort of the background to the build thing as well. Like, there really wasn't a whole lot of thought that went into it. And, and then with Dynamite Dunes, I kind of did a bit more with the outro, and then Leafy Lake, I was like, this is a big park, I can really do a lot of interesting stuff here, and Diamond Heights. And then by the time I got to Evergreen Gardens, where I really had a lot of freedom to play with the outro, it started to give me a pretty good idea of the type of, like, structure that my video should follow and how the ending should work. As not just the ending, but like the whole production, of course. But in particular, I would say the evolution of the videos, though, like, I haven't changed a whole lot in my production pipeline from episode 1, aside from the order that I approach things and trying to find efficiencies to be able to do things a lot faster than I was at the very beginning. But the other thing that I've been trying to improve is like actually making the outros more interesting and, to really showcase the park as best as possible. As I do want these to sort of be like, definitively, I don't want to replay RollerCoaster Tycoon Deluxe again. So I want this to be like definitively, yes, this is the build of this park in this version of the game. Although, like I said, I'm definitely going to be replaying these in Classic and Open RCT too. But the approach that I'll take in those games will be quite a bit different because of the piece by piece build materials. I'll be able to do a lot more interesting things in terms of buildings and path canopies and that type of stuff. Like, it'll be different. I'll do different parks with them. I'm not just going to remake the same park as I did before. Although in some of them, given, if the design of the park was really, really good and I can just improve the park, in some cases I might do that with the piece by piece buildings, but I think in most cases I'll probably just end up doing a new design for the parks from scratch. I had finally kind of gotten through the whole forested area. In theming this, what ended up kind of happening with the go-kart station there was it ended up looking a lot more clean and towny than I had wanted originally. And I was kind of debating on whether or not I would change that to go with more of the, sort of woodsy feel that I thought I was going for out in this area of the park. But then just when I sort of like stood back and I did some overviews of like the whole thing and just how things were blending together and stuff like that. And I just felt that, no, I'm going to go back to some sort of nicer area here, brick. I put this building with the queue and the whole bunch of archways there, bazillion archways in that building, and the nice fountains and things. And I thought it would actually ended up looking really nice. You have the sort of on one side of this little tiny lake, you've got the go-karts. On the other side of the lake, you've got like this chateau or something. I don't know what it is. Giant brick building for the, to provide some anchor points for the chain lift of the roller coaster, and also gives a little bit more character to the go-karts that go in underneath there. And yeah, I was just, I really like this area. And then you have the nice dirt path that goes, lakeside there. I don't know if you can really call these lakes, but they're little lakes. And yeah, I really thought that this area ended up coming together a lot nicer than I thought it would end up looking. I really thought that what I would end up doing with this would just kind of be like deep forest cabin style wood. But then, yeah, as I sort of just ran with that go-kart station, it was like one of those cases where you're just building something and you don't sort of realize what you're building, and you intended to build one thing and then you start building that one thing, and before you know it, it looks like something completely different. And in a lot of cases, like, I'm just completely displeased when that happens. I'm just, I'll trash it, or I might even go back to my last save just to save myself the effort of having to like remove everything or something like that, and then I cut it from the recording. But and I don't do that a whole lot, by the way. There's, this recording is pretty much as long as I play. I think there was one time in this map playthrough where I ended up reloading the game because I just sort of started building something like really wacky that wasn't going to work. And it was like a building. It wasn't even a ride. So yeah, there's that. But for the most part, everything that I build or attempt to build, or even the mistakes I make, are present in the build playthrough. The only ones that I really cut are where it's a huge waste of time. Like, I literally want to just reset what I did and go to how it looked before. And in those cases, I will, cut it because nothing really happened. Like, the park hasn't changed in between the time that I started building it and the time that I reload the save. So just the finishing touches here now on the sort of deep forest area. I thought it'd be really neat if the monorail just sort of traveled right through it, and some sort of blending points with the buildings that are more wood oriented, leading towards the nicer brick side of things. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed playing through this map. Aside from the slog of the forest, it ended up turning like the end result is way better than I thought it was going to be, hands down. I really, really, really like the end result, and I hope that this will, sort of shine through in the outro video, which will be coming up shortly here. So I hope you've enjoyed this build. And, as always with my videos, here is the end result.